Thanks for staying with us. And Bill O'Reilly in a Weekdays at Bernie segment tonight. President Obama granted 6 network news anchors 7 minutes each to talk about Syria today.
They have a tremendous military capability relative to civilians. They have a significant military capability relative to children who are being gassed. But they don't have a military that matches up with ours in any kind of way. Mr. Assad doesn't have a lot of capability. He has capability relative to children. He has capability relative to an opposition that is still getting itself organized and are not professional trained fighters. He doesn't have a credible means to threaten the United States. I don't take it as a credible threat in the sense that Mr. Assad doesn't have the capacity to strike us in a significant way.
3 different interviews, same answer. Joining us from North Carolina with analysis, Bernie Goldberg. So you saw the transcripts, I have them here, of all the interviews. Who impressed you the most? Anybody?
No, not really. Look, I think some interviews may have been marginally better than others. But look, the reason you got the same answers in those sound bites you just played is because everybody asked pretty much the same questions,
yeah,
and pretty much got the same answers. Now, I hesitate to say this because I know how the liberal critics who are lying in wait will what they'll make of this. But I did think that Chris Wallace's final question to the president was especially good. He challenged the president on his inconsistencies. He pointed out that the president had said for quite some time that Syria was not in our national interest, and until it was, and said he wouldn't go to Congress until he changed his mind on that. And I think in that sense, Chris asked the best out of the ordinary type of question.
Now, let me just tell the audience.
Nobody blew the interview. Nobody blew the interview.
It was you couldn't blow it. It was too easy. And it wasn't an easy interview, but the questions were easy. But here's what Wallace said. Wallace said, look, how much responsibility, Mr. President, do you bear for this whole chaotic situation because you've been so inconsistent on your leadership? But Wallace asked it in a very long way, and Obama replied, that was a long question. Let me see if I can keep the answer shorter. And then he answered what he wanted to answer, which had nothing to do with what Well, now here's a difficulty that everybody should understand. Number one, a 7-minute interview with a guy like Barack Obama who can talk about his shoelaces for 15 minutes without you getting a word in, is very difficult. And you got to be right there, cutting them off. As soon as you cut off the president of the United States, all the flags go over. Everybody's yelling at you. Believe me, I've interviewed him twice. That's exactly what happens. But what should have happened is that the interviewer should have zoned in on 1 or 2 points. Number one, the one I would have, and I shouldn't say this because I'm trying to get the president on the factor. I don't think he's going to come, but we've invited him. I want to know, why President Obama, he just won't lead. Why he didn't lead in Libya, why he didn't lead in Egypt. And, you're not looked upon as a strong leader. That's why most conservatives aren't backing your play. They don't have any confidence that you're a quote-unquote wartime consigliere, godfather.
That's right. He's not. Right. That's right. He's not a wartime president. That's absolutely true. I will say this. I have a lot of trouble being a Monday evening quarterback for people doing a live interview with the president. Tough. In a very confined amount of space.
Sure.
If I'm talking to you for 7 minutes, at some point, and you're probably going to do it in the next 5 seconds, you're going to cut me off and say, let me go on to the next question. But you can't do that to the president.
I did.
He's the president.
I did it in the Super Bowl interview, and I caught hell for it. I was disrespectful. I was this. I was that. The president actually liked it because he was feisty and this and that. And you'll remember in one time, I told him the Muslim Brotherhood was going to be a disaster. I told him right to his face, it's going to be a disaster. But you don't get that kind of confrontational style from the anchors, which is why he chose the anchors, because they have to be anchors. They can't be feisty guys.
No, because it's not just that feisty or not feisty. They do something fundamentally different than what you do.
Yes.
You'll agree with that.
Right, but the folks don't get the information flow from the people who just ask the questions and won't challenge.
So, look, the anchor of the evening news isn't going to go up there and say, Mr. President, is it fair to say the American people really don't trust you?
Why not?
They really don't have confidence.
Why wouldn't they say
that you're going to? Because that implies a certain bias, that you,
No, it
the
doesn't.
anchor,
It's a legitimate
believes
question. Every poll says the same thing. They don't trust him.
Well, here's a question that I would have asked, okay?
Right.
And tell me what you think of this. Tell me if this meets the O'Reilly standard. I would have said, Mr. President, you set a red line, and it was just words. It meant absolutely nothing. And then you said, I didn't set a red line. The world set a red line. Then you said you didn't have to go to Congress, and you sent your Secretary of State out to make a forceful case for military action. 24 hours later, you said you're going to Congress, and you didn't even know how Congress would vote on the issue. A no vote would weaken you domestically, internationally, and would weaken America. Mr. President, do you think you took a bad situation and made it worse? Now, I think that's a good question. You'll tell me if you do, but it's not easy to ask the president something like that.
It is an excellent question, but it took 7 minutes and the interview's over. So, Bernie, thanks very much. Good to see you. Karl Rove on deck.